Well, it's time for us to take a look at what's grabbing the news around the world. And Florence Villeminot joins me now. Good morning to you again, Florence. Very much a top story for us here on France 24, the bombing of that aid convoy in Aleppo in Syria, and a real blame game taking place now between the United States and Russia.
Oh, that's right. Let's take a look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal. You can see a photo of the aftermath of that bombing and that headline that says that there's finger pointing over that Syria aid convoy bombing. Now, initially, U.S. authorities blamed Syrian forces, but now, and you can read more about it in the New York Times as well, U.S. officials say that Russia was probably responsible for that deadly bombing. And they're basing this analysis on aerial footage, etc. Now, what's interesting is to see how United Nations officials are responding to this. Of course, this was a United Nations aid convoy. Yesterday, UN officials suspended all aid convoys in Syria, describing the bombing as a possible war crime and a cowardly act.
Okay, but regardless of who's to blame, where does this leave, many are asking, that very fragile ceasefire deal that was struck between Moscow and Washington?
Well, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says that this fragile ceasefire is not over, but a lot of papers beg to differ. And they say, you know, when a UN aid convoy is bombed, that pretty much means that a ceasefire is over. This is a very interesting cartoon in Al Hayat. That's a Saudi-financed paper based in London. You can see this cartoon with that diplomat there holding the ceasefire agreement with that hole in it, possibly due to a mortar. Now, that triangle he's standing in, it says it's back to the starting point. So essentially, the situation has really regressed. And if we look at the editorial in The Guardian, the British paper, it agrees we have reached a new low in the Syrian war. There can be no enthusiasm for a ceasefire that has not even protected humanitarians.
Indeed. And of course, Russia has a very different version of events. They say it wasn't an aerial strike at all, something that happened on the ground. But we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. But the media in Russia, not so much focused, in fact, on what happened in Syria. They're more concentrated on parliamentary elections that took place at the weekend.
That's right. And remember that Vladimir Putin's United Russia party won 3/4 of the seats in the State Duma, so that's the lower house of parliament. This is an interesting opinion piece, or editorial rather, in the Moscow Times, which is wondering about what's coming next. These results were no real shocker, but they're kind of looking into the crystal ball. What is next for Russia? And it actually has a warning for the Kremlin about two traps that the Kremlin, so Vladimir Putin, could fall into. The first trap has to do with democratic legitimacy. According to this article, the Kremlin is running out of ways to maintain its military autocratic legitimacy. It can't really play the Crimea card again. And according to this article, Russians don't actually really care about foreign policy wins. What they really care about is the economy. And so it calls on the Russian authorities to really put in place some serious economic policies that they probably don't actually want to put in place because they're going to be quite tricky. And that leads us to the second trap. We have these legislative elections right now, these parliamentary elections, but the problem is the presidential election isn't until 2018, and that's quite a bit away. And so Vladimir Putin can't really play the waiting game. He has to put in place some serious reform. It's interesting to see that analysis compared to analysis coming out of the U.S. media. If we take a look at the editorial in the New York Times today, you can see they have a completely different vision about what this election means. You can see they're talking about this easy victory for Vladimir Putin. Putin and his Kremlin cronies have consolidated full control over Russian politics.
Again, such different versions of events between the US media and the Russian media. Let's move to the US, though, because, of course, it almost feels like right now hardly a day goes by when we don't have a story like this, the story of an unarmed black male being shot by the police, and this latest incident in Oklahoma.
That's right, and there are, once again, very different versions about just what happened. You can read more about it in the Washington Post, which comes back on this event. This happened on Friday. We're talking about 40-year-old Terrence Crutcher shot to death after his car stalled. Now, there is a debate swirling about whether or not he tried to reach into his car. That's what the police say, but his family says no. His hands were up, and anyway, the window of his car was up, so there's no way that he could actually reach into the car. The Daily Beast, though, it really echoes what you're saying. It says, another cop video, another dead citizen. And they say that they took a look at this footage and said there is no proof why that he should have been shot. This man was clearly unarmed. His hands were in there, and you can actually see a screen grab from that footage.
Extremely sad story. But on a much lighter note, you've picked out a story which is, well, I suppose for some people very sad news, but for other people it might be good news. Two people back on the market. I'm talking about Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie.
That's right. It's sad to say, but this really is the story that's dominating the press today. Check out this tweet. I must admit, I love this headline. This is from City AM. London School of Economics lecturer to divorce her actor husband. Now, there is a lot of focus on just how this divorce is going to go down. Courrier International has a profile of Angelina Jolie's lawyer, Laura Vassar, the Hollywood heartbreak lawyer. She has represented a lot of people in Hollywood, including Stevie Wonder and at least 3 of the Kardashian sisters. People magazine, meanwhile, looks at what's at stake. We're talking about an estimated $500 million combined. And my favorite article, I must say, is the Daily Beast today. They say, love is dead, everything is the worst, goodbye world. So maybe a little bit over dramatic, but I must say this story is huge, and a lot of people are saying it nearly broke the internet.
Well, they did a lot better than a lot of other Hollywood couples, and neither of them are going to go hungry with $500 million at stake. Thank you so much for that. Florence Villeminot there with the International Media Summary.